lawsuit is the deepest look we've gotten of just how bad things could be at the Southern Regional Jail and beyond. On Monday, attorneys representing current and former SRJ inmates are going before a federal magistrate to argue that the state has been destroying evidence in their investigation. Now we're getting a first-hand look at the scope of the problems inside the facility that saw 13 inmates die just last year. At the Southern Regional Jail in Raleigh County are documented instances of no water in cells,
Cell 1, sink doesn't work.
to toilets that won't flush.
Cell 16, toilet doesn't flush.
Mold-infested areas, unsanitary conditions, and allegations of basic human needs like medical care and food being withheld from inmates.
It was just a powder keg at the Southern Regional Jail for the longest time.
Beckley attorney Stephen New is representing current and former inmates at the Southern Regional Jail in a class action lawsuit focusing on conditions inside the facility.
This isn't being soft on crime. The 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution and the West Virginia Constitution talk about cruel and unusual punishment, and there's lots of case law about where the line gets crossed from this is jail and it was not designed to be a comfortable situation to the point where it does get unconstitutional. I believe we crossed that line in West Virginia a long time ago.
New is also filing a federal injunction against Governor Jim Justice and others. He wants to force the state to do $270 million in deferred maintenance and spend at least $60 million to fill vacancies. Corrections officials echoing the same sentiment in recent deposition videos obtained by Eyewitness News that the governor and legislature have repeatedly been told about the dire conditions and needs that have gone unmet and unfunded for years.
Prior to every legislative session, we have meetings with the budget office. We provide them with our needs. Our needs were clearly articulated along with all other Homeland Security agencies. They're advised of that. We transparent, we tell them.
Did you ask the question, how did we get here? How did we get to $200 million of deferred maintenance?
I'm sure that everybody asks that question, and the answer was we depend on the money that's allotted to us. Every year there's a certain amount that is allotted for maintenance, but it doesn't touch what the overarching bill is.
Former Corrections Commissioner Betsy Jividen said she was pressured to resign in July 2022 over the death of a family member of one of the governor's cabinet secretaries.
Who gave you word that the governor wanted you gone?
Jeff Sandy.
And why did the governor want you gone?
I can tell you what Jeff Sandy told me.
Okay, do that.
Jeff Sandy told me that Brian Abraham was upset about Secretary Riston's nephew dying in the hospital after being incarcerated at Southern, and that he had gone to the governor, and that's when the governor had asked for my resignation.
Who is Secretary Riston?
Secretary of Transportation.
In his testimony, Sandy denied it happened, and Jividen said she'd been debating stepping down before that incident out of sheer frustration.
Not being able to get the pay raises, not being able to do the maintenance, it was very frustrating.
The deposition's also painting a questionable picture of an investigation ordered by Justice into the Southern Regional Jail in March 2022. Sandy, who was State Homeland Security Cabinet Secretary at the time, said he was ordered to go to the facility by Justice Chief of Staff Brian Abraham.
Why did the governor order this investigation?
Because of all the negative media that was out there concerning Southern Regional Jail.
Allegations in the press that inmates were drinking out of toilets, not being given toilet paper, and sleeping on bare floors.
Those were the main things that they were interested in, was water, toilet paper, and mattresses.
Less than a month before Sandy's visit, 37-year-old Quantez Burks died in custody after being at the Southern Regional Jail for less than 48 hours. The state said he died of natural causes, but a private autopsy proved otherwise.
He walked in and got carried out in a body bag, and What's wrong?
It's not right.
2 corrections officers are set to plead guilty in November after federal investigators say Burks was beaten as punishment while restrained.
I was very upset by that. I reviewed the videos myself. I read the reports. I worked on the report. I spent a lot of time going over that. I recommended that an expert be hired to look at that use of force. Several people lost their jobs.
None of that was part of the investigation Sandy was ordered to conduct. Nothing about staffing, overcrowding, a growing number of inmate deaths, or anything other than water, toilet paper, and mattresses. Sandy said he only personally talked to 3 inmates who were handpicked by jail leaders and several COs. 10 more inmates were interviewed by another investigator a week later. He said he didn't step foot inside a cell, didn't check sinks, showers, or toilets.
Did not go into any pod, did not go into any cell. I went to the observation area and looked down on multiple pods.
Test the water from there?
Did not test the water from there, sir.
Sandy said he hadn't been told about a walkthrough and documentation of the shape of the jail just a few months prior when these videos and pictures were taken by a lieutenant.
No means of working communication from cell to tower. So after lockdown, they'd have to beat on the doors.
But later he testified he wished he had. About a month later, the governor's office published Sandy's 14-page report, concluding nothing was wrong at the jail. They called the allegations made in the news simply not true.
It is correct, sir. I stand by the report.
While the lawsuit cites inaction by the Justice Administration, the governor declared a state of emergency over staffing at West Virginia jails more than a year ago and called in the National Guard to help.
We have been dealing with this situation for too long. Way too long.
A month ago, Justice signed several bills meant to prop up the decaying facilities that have a roughly 30% overall vacancy rate. His new Department of Homeland Security Cabinet Secretary and Corrections Commissioner stood beside him.
Now we're on a pathway of making things better for a lot of folks that are here. But not only that, we're on a pathway to hopefully be able to have adequate staffing to where everybody can do their job safely and do their job correctly and do their job humanely in every way.
New thinks the new legislation is simply too little, too late.
Within the Justice Administration, they have the ability to fix a lot of these issues.
We've reached out to Governor Justice's top administration for comment, and Chief of Staff Brian Abraham has agreed to sit down with me early next week. As for the separate federal investigation into the facility that led to the charges against the 2 correctional officers for the death of Quantez Burks, it's still ongoing. Reporting in the studio, Leslie Rubin, Eyewitness News. Today's hearing was focused solely on evidence in the ongoing federal class action suit centered around conditions at the Southern Regional Jail that attorneys claim were inhumane and unconstitutional. Attorney Steve New, who's leading the class action suit on behalf of current and former inmates, argues that the state has destroyed evidence, things like emails, video, inmate grievances, and cell phones that were ordered to be preserved under law. And it was clear from Magistrate Omar Abu Hussen's reactions and comments throughout the hearing that he found testimony from current and former high-ranking State Department of Homeland Security and divisions of corrections and rehabilitation employees that it simply wasn't a thought to preserve that evidence. Hard to believe. A direct quote from him: "My head is about to explode up here trying to understand how in the world this happened." We heard from current DCR Executive Director Brad Douglas about he said he simply did not have an excuse and he just didn't think to preserve emails from former officials like DCR Commissioner Betsy Jividen and former SRJ Superintendent Mike Francis after they left the state. There was lengthy testimony during today's 4.5-hour marathon hearing about how everyone just thought the emails would be preserved and no one seemed to know that they'd be completely gone after 30 days, or what the state calls deprovisioned. There was testimony like, quote, "I should have known that, but didn't think about it." They said that some state cell phones couldn't be accessed because they just didn't know the codes to get into them, or they couldn't find the phones. When it came to video, an attorney for DHS blamed the plaintiff's attorneys for not supplying hard drives to copy it themselves. The judge calling the testimony damning, even though an attorney for former top jail and prison officials explained the issues away by testimony that there was never any intent within the state to destroy the evidence and make it irretrievable. They contend that this is all just technical, they didn't think of it. The judge found that hard to believe. Do you think that there was an intent to not have these emails available and this video available?
Here's what I will say about that, is it seems awfully convenient knowing the wave of case after case after case that was going to be brought against the Southern Regional Jail, that no one just happened to think we need to preserve evidence.
It was Chief of Staff Brian Abraham's chance to respond to our reporting over the last several weeks about a number of ongoing issues at the state's correctional facilities. And it's a contentious topic that's likely to get a lot of attention as next year's legislative session is just around the corner. It's been more than a year since Governor Jim Justice declared a state of emergency over critical staffing shortages at correctional facilities across West Virginia. Since then, more than 300 National Guard members have been helping staff the facilities that house more than 10,000 inmates. The Guard doesn't perform correctional officer duties, but they do come with a hefty price tag. According to the most recent numbers from the state auditor's office, $21,705,002.91 has been paid from the Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation to the Guard for salaries since the state of emergency. Just shy of $3 million on top of that has been spent on hotels for Guard members to stay near the facilities they're assigned. How does the governor justify the use of that taxpayer money?
Part of that money, if it weren't spent on the National Guard members, a good portion of it would be going to wages for correctional officers if they were in those positions.
At a hearing last week in the SRJ lawsuit, federal magistrate Omar Abu Hussein said he couldn't wrap his head around hours of testimony from current and former corrections officials centered around how evidence in the case had been handled. Abraham contends no one intentionally destroyed evidence.
Was there a mistake made? Yes, by somebody at Department of Corrections, whether it was a legal person or not.
I also had the chance to sit down one-on-one with newly appointed DHS Cabinet Secretary Mark Sorcea to talk about all of these issues and what has to happen to end the state of emergency. Coming up next in my series of reports, you'll hear from Sorcea directly about a surprise trip he made to the Southern Regional Jail. And we have new numbers about overcrowding in the facilities that may surprise you. Reporting in the studio, Leslie Rubin, Eyewitness News. Within his first week on the job as Cabinet Secretary for the West Virginia Department of Homeland Security, Mark Sorcea had already been named in a lawsuit focused on conditions in the state's regional jails and prisons.
The jail that I went to, they was looking pretty good.
The jail he's talking about visiting is the Southern Regional Jail in Raleigh County, a facility that's now the focus of a federal class action lawsuit alleging inhumane and unconstitutional conditions. Sorcea says he made a surprise visit there in early September.
And I can tell you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that jail. Quite frankly, I was shocked about how nice and good condition that jail was in.
We tried to check his claim that there was no overcrowding at Southern that day, but multiple requests for the inmate population during the time frame were unanswered by the state. According to new numbers obtained by Eyewitness News through a Freedom of Information Act request, Southern still leads the other 9 regional jails in the number of inmate deaths this year, with 4 so far. 6 other facilities have 2 or fewer. We were the first to tell you this week that a federal magistrate was pumping the brakes on attorneys for current and former inmates at the jail, deposing Governor Justice and his Chief of Staff, Brian Abraham. It's all part of that ongoing lawsuit that alleges inhumane and unconstitutional conditions at the Beckley facility. But it's not case closed for the governor, as the judge has yet to rule officially if those lawyers will get a chance to question the state's chief executive. Governor Jim Justice says he has no problem giving testimony in a lawsuit about conditions at the Southern Regional Jail, but he thinks it would be a lost cause.
I would welcome anyone at any time to swear me into doing sworn testimony.
It's been a messy and chaotic week for jail officials also caught in the middle of that document debacle you've been reporting on for months now.
That's what's brought us here today. Andrew Fleshman and Stephen Wimmer just pleaded guilty on a conspiracy charge for Burks' death that happened at the Southern Regional Jail on March 1st of last year. That's really an extraordinary move that would signal an end to this litigation in favor of the plaintiffs. All in all, at the end of the day, this could have a sweeping effect on corrections across the entire state. For now, reporting live in Beckley, Leslie Rubin, Eyewitness News.